Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest in the series of the Green Footsteps Guide. This morning, we're going to be talking about food. If you go to page 35 on the Green Footsteps Guide, you'll see a number of pages there. Beautiful illustration with tomatoes and little snails, which I absolutely love on there. And there's several pages there around agricultural production, retail, specific data around food production. Loads of stuff, loads and loads of information and data there, and things that you can look to do as organizations to move forward. And I'm really, really, really lucky that I've got lovely Holly here to talk us through this, because this is her area of passion and expertise. So I'm just going to hand over to Holly for her to introduce herself and talk about what you do and why we should care about this.
Oh, thank you. Lovely to see you, Kirstie, and viewers. Yeah, I'm part of Sustainable Food Cornwall, and I'm a director at Basavon Community Farm, one of the largest, oldest community farms in the UK. And I run Gleaning Cornwall, so I know a bit about food waste. And I'm a director of regenerative food and farming. And basically, yeah, IPPC report came out and didn't know what to do, discovered soil carbon capture, and it's rolled from there, really. But basically, for everyone, we all eat, right? And a third of our global emissions come from the food sector. That's the production of the food mainly. And then also, obviously, the transportation, the packaging, the refrigeration, the sale of, and the cooking. It's massive. And so every choice we have about our food is going to have an impact. And I find going around a supermarket really confusing and really sometimes quite depressing and difficult, because you can look at everything too much and you can just end up stuck. But there are in the guide some basic bits and bobs, and I'm going to run through a few of them in the time I've got. But like others, I'm here to answer questions. I do presentations. I'm happy to get phone calls and contacted by organizations if they want some more steer, and happy to do a more in-depth dive into what you're doing for free, because it's my passion to help. And so details, you can reach me through Gleaning Cornwall. That's the website there. It's probably the easiest thing. Cool. Okay, so we all have a carbon footprint, and I've got to try and work out how to do my screen. There we go. So sustainable food it has to cover so much. It's not only the production in a sort of regenerative or agroecological way, where we sort of mix up our land use better. We rotate more, we try and use cover crops and herbal lays, and use animals more sparingly and not intensively. And we reduce our use of chemicals. But it's also making sure that the people that we buy our coffee and tea and our foreign goods are getting a fair wage, and it's trying to support local and in-season produce, because obviously the carbon footprint will be lower. Reducing our waste at every level, because if food waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitting in the world, which is crazy. And one nice thing to remember is that, and potentially pass on, is that 12 banana skins, just the skins, can recharge your laptop from nothing to full, but if it's put into an anaerobic digester. So we all need to be using our recycling bins more, and workplaces can encourage knowledge around that sort of factoid, to get people, even from their home environments, recycling their food, even though it's yucky, because they know a bit more about what's happening to it. And what we've found is generally a really lovely takeaway from the work I've done, is that if you buy the more climate friendly food, you're going to be buying the healthier food for your colleagues, your family, and yourself. And so it's a win-win, but it is a quagmire. There is a lot to it. So yeah, the 28% of our food gets wasted, and that's just needs to reduce. We need to manage our fridges and your food museums that can get to the back of the cupboard, and just kind of work from what you've got rather than what you fancy, which is a whole different mindset. And obviously some workplaces don't, you won't be involved with food at all. Some will have catering in bought in, and having policies in place that you can lean upon and say, look, we need to provide food that is climate happy food, in every setting you can then filter through, and you can make a big difference and impact with where you're spending your bucks. But I know obviously every organization is going to have a different influence. So yeah, reducing waste is an obvious easy win. I'll come back to the what you can do at the end, but a quick dive, okay, into food. Here's a map that, or a graph rather, that I find really useful, which shows at the top the total Earth surface and how much land is actually available. Basically, we're mainly a blue planet. Of that 29% of the Earth's surface it being land, only 71% is habitable, because you've got your barren land and your glaciers. And then of that 71% going down, only 50% is currently used for agriculture. We've unfortunately been dipping into the forests too much, and that's where some issues lie, with more intensive livestock production in forests in the global south, for example. But anyhow, continuing down, 50% of our agricultural land of that, 77% is being used by livestock, meat, and dairy. Now, that is the basic issue with meat. Meat can obviously, if it's coming from ruminants, produce quite a lot of methane, but good meat production can also sequester carbon. However, the majority doesn't currently. So we need to make sure we buy better meat, but less of it. And if you go further down, you can see that the protein and the calorie supply that comes from that 77% of agricultural land being taken up by meat and dairy is actually pretty small, compared to the non-meat crops, the crops. So I find that basically the reason for us needing to reduce our red meat, especially. And the our local climate change committee has advised the government quite recently that we've got to reduce our meat production and what we eat by between 25 and 30%. And for you in this sector, we need to be trying to help upskill everyone in the team, and any connections we can in our plant-based diets. We have to really relearn how to cook, using more pulses and loads more fresh vegetables that are in season if possible, because even a potato or a vegetable will have a good way of being grown or a bad way of being grown as well. So this thing is really nuanced. Bare soil emits carbon. It literally blows it burns up into the atmosphere, and it loses water, whereas covered land will hold water, and will also even suck through plants, doing photosynthesis, you might remember from school, suck carbon from the atmosphere down into its body, and also feed, through the roots, all this wonderful life on the soil, with its the sticky stuff that comes out of the roots called, which is carbohydrate base. It's basically carbon with water. and some vitamins and acids that feed that life in the soil, which then cycles and basically captures some of that carbon down in our soils. But if you spray the land, if you put loads of chemicals on it, in even artificial fertilizers, and if you plow a lot and leave the land bare, you're going to be losing all that carbon. So there's a balance to be met. And actually, in the UK, we've now got the sustainable farming incentive payments, which have totally radically changed our agricultural system slowly for the better. It's a hard time to be a farmer as a result. But if we buy British, we are supporting a more sustainable farming transition, which is really exciting. We're world leading. But, why would a supermarket buy more expensive meat? So they go abroad, right? So getting to know your supply chains and getting to buy local and asking questions about its production are really positive things that you can do. And on the list, you can potentially join with other local organizations to create a buying group from the likes of Suma, which is organic and ethical. And if you're buying lots of tins of tomatoes as a group, the price comes down, right? Even if it's more ecological, local, sustainable. And on the sustainable, sorry, Cornwall, no, what's it called? Sustainable Food Cornwall website, there's also a map of all your local agroecological market gardens and producers that are using more regenerative, agroecological, climate-friendly type farming systems. So yeah, soil health is kind of interesting, but I'm not going to go any more on that. So another thing to bear in mind is we have these ugly feedlots, even in the UK. We've just done a deal with America. Most of their meat production is done in that way, where you're not sequestering carbon in those beautiful herbal lays and different pastures that actually can hold more carbon than forests. They're just, and the poor animals, you just don't want to be part of that. So unless you know where your meat's coming from, just reduce it right down, unfortunately. And if you can buy organic, that's great, because you're not having to produce pesticides, which are killing all the good pests as well as the bad. And this is, I find, quite interesting because basically the long and short is that organic doesn't necessarily mean better for the amount of nutrients and the water filtration of the soil and the organic matter and carbon in the soil, because it could just be a monocrop that's had loads of tillage, right, and bare soils. But high in density regenerative, which are like those growers on the Sustainable Food Cornwall map, you will be getting more nutrients. You will be helping the soil hold more moisture to help with flooding and the resilience to drought as well. I think the way to really push this has always been that healthy for the climate is healthy for us. And if you can get that across to your work teams and your colleagues and your family, then that really helps. And interestingly, the health of soil is totally connected to our gut health. And we all know now what gut health does, right? It's anything to do with inflammation, most non-communicative diseases, and it links up to our mental health through our spines. So we really need to kind of utilize that sort of selfish gene that this stuff for the planet is important for our health. And so just as a reminder, if you can, within your spare time, or you can potentially put someone in your team in charge of food and food waste, because it's a big thing, right? So first of all, you need to train your team. It may not be you, it could be me helping. And on the regenerativefoodandfarming.org.uk website, there are downloads in the Learn More section that can help you upskill yourself and your team. And you can help with vegan and veggie recipes and producing more climate friendly food so that you're leading by example, basically. Then, of course, you've got to find out where to buy this lovely local seasonal produce. So see the Sustainable Food Cornwall website, but ask around. There will be people who are further along this journey than you. Learn from them about where supplies are locally. I mentioned creating a sort of buying group or cooperative, and I know people that do that with Suma, because buying in bulk is cheaper. Buy fair trade. I've been to a coffee plantation that wasn't fair trade and it was pretty dire. So fair trade, organic, local in season. Ask questions. Are you using agroecological food production? If you go to your butcher, and when it comes to potatoes and flour, they use so many chemicals because they're difficult to produce at scale. And so, if you can buy organic, especially for flour, bready products and potatoes, that's really good for you. And obviously recycle your food waste and try and reduce your packaging. If there's space, then creating a compost heap outside out of your green waste is a great way of reducing cost of moving this stuff. But you've got to provide the bins, they've got to be cleaned out, you've got to have really good labels. So it's a massive job. But yeah, if you want to reach me, go through Gleaning Cornwall and I'm here to help. Any questions, Kirstie?
Wow, you know what? I just learnt absolutely loads, and I thought I knew quite a bit, so that was amazing. I love your the some of the diagrams and the illustrations, incredible there. And I really, do you know, it's the first time I've actually understood about land use from your little image there about how much of the planet is and then what it's used for. That I've always struggled to understand a little bit that when we use sort of like generalized terms about agriculture and plant-based, whatever, actually to
Yeah.
see it so clearly written down and what we're using more land for and actually what it's giving us in return, that's absolutely fascinating to me. That's really helped me to visualize the food choice thing
Yeah.
a bit more, so that was really good. I guess for me, I mean, we're lucky, I guess, now that we have transitioned now in Cornwall into using food waste. We've got food waste collections now everywhere. I think we were the last area in Falmouth area, the central part of Cornwall, to go over. So that's really, really good. So I think I'm assuming, I don't know, but I'm assuming for businesses and organisations, they would also have food waste collection under their business.
Yeah,
Do you know
they
about
do
that?
have to now. If you
They do, yeah.
employ, well, it depends on the size of the business.
Right.
If you employ, I think, 30 people, then
Yeah,
you have to have a
great.
commercial food waste collection. Our food waste is going up to Devon, which is
Yes.
kind of crazy. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to push the council to have more AD down here.
Me too. I've been doing that for about 15 years.
It's so annoying, isn't it? Oh my
So
God.
annoying. All
So
that
then I was
energy we could
thinking,
be
right,
generating ourselves.
I know, but yeah, it's there's a lot to unpack, but that
Yeah.
map is basically okay. Yeah, we do need to reduce our meat, and we need to buy from Britain because we are really ahead of the curve,
Yeah, we are.
and but some butchers might, and it has been known, sell meat as Cornish when actually it's coming in from South America,
Wow.
which is just illegal.
Ooh, yeah.
So if you imagine that, you, it, beef sometimes gets culled more in the summer, and so it's more likely to be British if you buy it in the summer, which is
Right. Okay.
interesting. But
That is
if you
interesting.
go for a supermarket, then there's labels saying, grass-fed now, which you think, oh, isn't it all?
Yeah,
No, it's not.
it's not.
Increasingly, we have these hideous feedlots. So yeah, and a lot of the meat stuff is about what they're eating. So if it's soya based, that's not so good.
Right. Because it has all
But
this
there are
secondary knock-on
lots of,
effect in terms of climate impact based on what they're eating as well.
yeah,
To generate soya is very, it's nutrient draining and very, very high water input. And also a lot of it's coming from South America, which is not
yeah,
great in terms of rainforest. There's so many issues that are down the supply chain, isn't there as well?
exactly. But there's a group of farmers in Cornwall who are getting their heads together and trialing different crops to replace soya, for example.
Yeah,
And because of the sustainable farming incentive, and because we give us a monkeys in Cornwall, we're
yeah.
really eco warriors down here, and we've got a lot of groups doing great things. So
Yeah, and I
don't
was
be
going to mention
disheartened.
that actually. Yeah, I was going to mention that as well because this isn't at all a sort of like an attempt to hit hard at the agricultural sector down here. Like Holly
Yeah,
says, in Cornwall particularly, we've got some really great innovation going on. In one
yeah,
of the Cornwall Care films, you can learn about what's happening in Cornwall in terms of agriculture. And there's this amazing project, this trial, and I think Cornwall Council have partnered in it as well with someone called Bennemans, and they've basically been experimenting with capturing the methane from cows, which comes from burps, not farts, I discovered recently, and using
lovely.
that to actually power some of their agricultural stuff that they need,
Tractors.
tractors and whatever, to get around the farm. So there is some really great innovative stuff happening down here, which is almost like a byproduct thing of the agricultural industry. So this isn't in any way, shape, or form an attack on our local farmers or anything like that.
No.
People are really trying to do better. They're trying to be innovative. They're trying to join up. But like Holly says, we've kind of culturally, I suppose, in the UK, got very used to the supermarkets. I still remember when we didn't have supermarkets, for example, and you did go to your butchers, bakers, whatever. And I'm only in my late 40s. I
Yeah,
still remember the first supermarket coming to where I lived at the time. And we've these sort of consumer patterns that we've now got. We're time poor, we're often financially poor. You're just grabbing things quickly on the go without really paying
yeah,
much attention. So it's almost like your first step is to be a bit more of a conscious buyer, a conscious purchaser, to actually think about it. Like Holly said, look at the labels, have the conversation. If you're able to, and I appreciate it's not financially available to everybody going to farmers markets, etc. There are also lots of really great local food box
yeah,
subscriptions that you can have. Like in my area, there's something called Soul Farm. There's also Loveland, which is both Falmouth area, which are both doing this regenerative farming. They're very local, and certainly with Soul Farm, they have different levels of purchasing that you can do to get subsidized
yeah,
so that it's accessible. So have a look in your area and see what there is, because almost certainly in Cornwall you're going to find some sort of local space that you can purchase more local produce, but without paying through the nose at a farmer's market style
yeah.
purchasing. So don't think just because you think, oh, it's probably a bit too much for me financially to manage right now. There are alternatives out there. I think everybody is very aware of that in Cornwall.
Yeah, and we have actually got more community supported agricultural schemes than any other county,
Doesn't
which
surprise
is
me.
great. And so it's not fair, but basically we don't pay enough for food. So those CSAs, they're called community
Yeah,
supported agriculture, they rely on volunteers, which brings the price down. So it
yeah,
does. And also those volunteers really quite like getting out. My son was yesterday planting trees at our local farm, and that's good for you. You need to get out, you need to
yeah.
get exercise. But I totally, having had young children on my own, get that sometimes you just don't have time to cook a proper meal from
All the
scratch
mental
every night.
capacity.
All the
You,
money,
yeah,
you
the
have
money.
to go
Yeah,
for pasta and pesto, or what,
yeah.
this stuff
Same.
that is fast and available.
Yeah.
But it's really it's a hard one. So it's a
It
balancing
is
act, and
hard.
it's
It is.
important not to cut yourself up about every food choice that
Decision.
you have.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
too
Yeah,
much.
I was thinking exactly that when you were talking, the sort of the shame spiral we get into a little bit.
Yeah,
Um, as parents, as individuals, you know, about all this stuff we're talking about in the Green Footsteps Guide. It's not always easy, and we have to understand and almost give ourselves permission to just do the best we can sometimes, to be
exactly.
more
Yes.
conscious about it. I was thinking when you were talking, well, what have I got in the fridge that needs using up? And I was just thinking I'm going to make a homemade green pesto with random stuff I've got in my fridge, rather than going and
Oh, that's
buying
clever.
basil and, you know, all the rest of it, and making it from scratch by a recipe, to actually go and
Yes,
just make a green pesto out of what I've already got here. I've got some garlic, wild garlic, for example, that I harvested, that I can
lovely.
chuck in there, and whatever else. So, you know, it's sometimes it is just giving yourself permission to work with what you've got, do the best you can,
Yeah,
and try and be a bit more conscious about what you're doing. And there are so many small little actions that you can take that will help this. So don't feel that you've got to get it perfect, I think is what I'm saying in any of these
yeah.
bits of the Green Guide, but particularly in the food one. It's about being conscious, doing what you can, trying to improve upon that. And it's called the Green Footsteps Guide for a reason, because this is a journey. It's not an overnight, you must do this, it's going to fix everything. It's a journey that we're all on together, and it's about taking those little steps as and when you can manage it, as organizations and as individuals, knowing that each of those small steps contributes to a much bigger picture of doing things better for the planet and locally in our community. So like, I think that's an important thing for us all to remember when we give ourselves a hard time, which undoubtedly those of us that are really passionate about this stuff do. Even I do, and I do so much, you know, and I still think, oh God, but I could do better. You know, it's hard, isn't it?
Too much. Yeah, it is really hard, and I say here to what you just said, and it goes to also not finger wagging,
Yeah,
and not looking at our dairy industry and beef industry in Cornwall. That our soils are so good as a result. You know,
yeah.
there's twos and fro's, and it is nuanced, and Britain is doing a really good job. So
Yeah,
we
which
must
is
be proud
reassuring.
occasionally.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that's another thing that I've learned this morning, that I didn't realize that we were really leading the way in this stuff, and that's really reassuring. Actually, doesn't surprise me, because we're really great at being innovative, aren't we? Certainly in the Southwest, and I think it is the UK as well. So yeah, really fascinating. Thank you so much for your time this
No
morning,
problem.
and thank you again for your generous offer of additional support for those that need it. You're always an inspiration to me. You're so knowledgeable and so kind and wonderful
Oh,
in your
shush.
passion and energy you have for this area of work.
Ditto.
And it's just wonderful. I think one thing that we're very fortunate to have in the climate and nature space is that these are a collection of people that do this stuff because they're passionate about it and they care about it, and they're really happy to share their expertise and knowledge. So thank you for being one of those people, and I'm sure you'll have people getting in touch with you, and keep up the
Great.
good work.
Thank you. And you.
Yeah, thank you so much.